Welcome to the Women in Agile Renew track. We've been having some really fabulous conversations with a bunch of awesome women about where do we go from here. We've had a really challenging year, and as we start moving forward, we all need a little bit of renewal and a little bit of a refresh. And today we have another wonderful woman in Agile to talk to. Faye?
Thanks everyone for joining us. And I think none of our speakers are going to help us through this time better than Zanele and Njhpha, who's joining us from South Africa. So please tell us a little bit about the future of learning.
Thank you so much, Faye, and thank you so much, Amelia, as well, for welcoming me. Such an honor to be on this platform with both of you today and speaking to the women and even the men that might watch this a little bit later on. So my title is Unlearning Expert, or the Unlearning Lady, as my clients call me. And really what I do, like you said a little bit there, Faye, is that it's all about understanding what learning, unlearning, and relearning means. And we all know the quote by Alvin Toffler, futurist, that says that the future really is all about learning, unlearning, and relearning, in the sense that the organizations that can learn, unlearn, and relearn are the organizations that can sustain and will be around and stay relevant in the next few years. He even goes on to say that our ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn is going to be almost as important, if not more, than our ability to read and write. So it's almost to the level of being literate. And if you think about that, it really hits you that in today's world where we get disrupted at the drop of a hat, and I always like to give the example of Weet-Bix, or Weetabix if you're in the UK, but I know they're also called Weet-Bix in the US. Really, really interesting cereal that I personally love. But the interesting thing about it is that you pour your milk into the Weet-Bix, you turn around to go to the fridge to put the milk back, and by the time you get back, the milk is completely gone. So I always say that we're living in the time of the Weet-Bix, where you put your head down to innovate or come up with a novel idea, and things have completely changed. And this is the really not just sad and nerve-wracking thing, but it's also the exciting thing. Because what it means is that this is an opportunity better than any for you and I at a personal level, for organizations, for functions, for industries, to start to unravel who they thought they were at one point, and then start to own a new identity that speaks to the time, that speaks to the future as well. And so that's really what this topic is all about. It's all about how do we come out of those perceptions of those, this is how we do things at company X, this is how we've always done things around here, stick to the rules. How do we start to break away from those so that we can own who we're becoming? Because just like Alvin Toffler said, it's the organizations that can move from one normal into another normal that are going to sustain and see themselves quite successful in a world of unprecedented change. I think COVID-19 has been, I don't want to say godsend because maybe that's pushing it, but it's been just such an interesting time because it's shown us that disruption is not one of those once in a while things. And it doesn't only take the form of tech. Disruption comes in non-tech form and in all different kinds of ways. And we need to start to engineer this capacity to be adaptable into our organizations, into our teams, and even into ourselves as individuals, just looking at where the future is going.
I love the way you stated that, because we do always live with uncertainty, but we have a lot of stories that we tell ourselves to believe that that uncertainty isn't there. And in fact, a lot of the structures you're talking about in organizations, like those processes and the cultural norms, are built around believing that we can engineer away uncertainty. And the fact is, it's always there. But in this instance, it's unprecedented. It's just, we most of us have not seen something like this in our lifetimes.
Exactly. And that's why I think so many of us, especially as futurists, are calling it an adaptive challenge, because it's one of those challenges that you can't necessarily say, okay, let me look in my book of the past few challenges that I've overcome and see what we did the last time. It's completely new. So it means that it's going to even need a new response from us that we haven't previously given to any kind of challenge before. So I think that it makes it really obvious that it needs us to really come out of our box of things that we've done, things that we're used to, things that are familiar and things that have worked in the past, and really start to seek new dimensions of thinking, new dimensions dimensions of learning and new ways of understanding innovation, understanding growth. And one of the really great examples to sort of speak to this point that I like to think about is this idea of the fourth industrial revolution, which is actually a term that's been overused. So I like to steer clear from it. But I really like that term in the sense that it's not necessarily speaking about inventing shiny new toys, because if you think of your artificial intelligence, augmented reality, additive manufacturing, all of those shiny new toys, if we can call them, have been invented and they're present for us to use. But the exciting thing about the fourth industrial revolution is that it's bringing a kind of systems innovation where those shiny new toys are changing the way that we do things and revolutionizing the way that we live our lives and the way that we work. And I think that this is where it really starts, when people can get this idea of, okay, so something completely new. I don't need to just do what I did cheaper, better, faster, but I need to almost reimagine the role that I will play, the role that my business will play, the role that my industry is going to play, and really come out of those conventional ways of thinking about things and innovating and strategizing as well.
So you really talked about sort of the three keys to that being learning, unlearning, and relearning. Could you define those for our listeners?
Sure, not a problem. So let's start here. Learning in essence is a combination of all. If you think about the way that our brains actually learn, it's through being introduced to new stimuli that then facilitate the creation of new neural pathways that form in the brain. And then over time, because you and I have got all of these defaults that are created in our brains, that's why certain things feel so warm and so familiar, and we jump to those ways of thinking. It's because it's become a default. But then when you introduce new neural pathways through new stimuli, maybe you interact with new people, you go to new places, you bring in new information and creativity, then what happens is that these new synapses or even neural pathways get formed. And then sometimes, if they are repeated consistently enough, they can even go to the extent of pruning the old ones. So learning, unlearning, and relearning, I like to always make sure that clients understand that they're all one. That the way that your brain learns is through relearning and unlearning. It's all a process that comes together. But for the sake of obviously this platform and your question, I am going to just define each one a little bit. So unlearning, really, we can define it not as forgetting. So this is really important. It's not forgetting. It's not, oh my goodness, I unlearned where my pen is. No, unfortunately, that's not really how it works. So unlearning is literally the conscious, and this is how I define it, the conscious choice to peel off old layers and replace them with new ones. So it's this exchange of a way of doing things for a new one. And that's why I always advise my clients, if you want to unlearn, rather focus on what you want to relearn, what is going to replace that pathway or that perspective that you now want to come out of. Because I always say that the pull of the future is stronger than the push of the past. So rather don't run away, but run towards something. So that would then be the unlearning. And then the relearning, as implied by this previous definition, is then what do you now bring on board that's new? What are you going to replace the unraveled pathways or the unraveled perspectives or ways of doing things with? What are you now putting into your system? What are the new ways of doing things? What are the skills that you want to start to acquire? And so and then together, unlearning and relearning is really how learning happens, which is why all three of those are a nice little threesome and should stay married the entire time. Because when we start to understand learning in that perspective, then we're not necessarily saying, okay, let me take stuff in the whole time, because that's what so many of us do. And that's what so many organizations do. They say, okay, we want to become a learning organization. All right, team, I'm putting you all on this program. Here's access to Udemy courses, this, that, and the other. And then what we don't understand is this unlearning part that we often rather actually put aside. And this is where I would then come in to say that this process of learning is actually made up of unlearning first. So it's like emptying your cup or peeling away an old coat of paint before you start to apply something new. So that's a great analogy that sort of helps people to understand it.